There is an awful lot of AI flying around the internet at the moment, and it seems to be quite prevalent in a lot of sewing groups where you will find a plethora of seemingly innocuous sewing patterns that are indeed AI generated. And you don't need a specific skill to spot the AI generated ones. This one has been debated a bit, so I've decided to have a look at this pattern and see, is it real? Can you make this dress from this pattern? Now, it does have a fair amount of information on it. There's measurements. It is also missing a few measurements, but most of all what's missing is the instructions. There are absolutely no instructions. So let's zoom out. I've got my dot and cross paper on the table, and let's draw this pattern in real life and see, is it real or is it AI? Here we go. I've printed out the design so that I have a reference, printed it out large so you can see it on the screen, and I have the bits and pieces of information readily available. It says it's a size large, but it doesn't give any other size information in reference to the size of this person. So we're missing a little bit of information despite there being quite a few measurements thrown in, and they've made sure to put large in there twice, so you know you're making a large, but you don't know what that really means. It's important to note as well that sizes vary hugely from country to country when it comes to small, medium, large, extra large. So a European large, for example, is much larger than an Asian large. However, a Southern European, like a Spanish large, is usually a lot smaller than a French large or a UK large. So all of that aside, we're going to work with the information we have here. I'm going to draw it out sideways on my paper here. And I'm going to try to not get myself into the camera too much so that you can see what's going on. So I've put my dot and cross paper down and I've taped it to the table surface, and we're going to work with the information we have. Now, I'm going to start with this line here because we know we're going to have a center front line. So I'm going to draw that in. Hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to start. We need a long center front line. That's what we know from this image. There we go. Now this pattern is in inches, so I'm going to say that 1 inch is 1 centimeter for the purpose of making my pattern. Now the next thing we notice is we have a waistline, so I'm just going to put that pretty much in the middle. So I know that we have the waistline. I'm going to put that here, and then we can kind of work around that. So now we have the 2 lines that we are absolutely certain are going to be there, and then we have to figure out where to put the rest of the lines. On this one, it says that the length of the skirt, so that would be from here to the hem, is 45 inches. So I'm going to do that in centimeters, meaning it will be 45 centimeters. This ruler is 40 centimeters, so that takes me to this dot here, and then I add another 5. That takes me almost all the way to the end of the paper. In fact, it takes me to here. So we now know that this line is exactly as long as it's supposed to be. So I'm going to colour that in with my blue marker pen here. And down to there. Now the other thing we know from this drawing is that the hemline is pretty parallel to the waistline. So I'm going to add my ruler here, and I'm going to just pencil in the hemline. It's going to be longer than this, but at least we know that that's going to be there. So that's working with the information that we have so far. The next bit of information is on the waist it says 5 inches. So we're working 5 inches is 5 centimeters. So I'm going to put my ruler on here and I'm going to mark 5 centimeters, which is going to be there. And then the next bit is 8 inches. So that will be 8 centimeters, which is, so I've put the 8 on the mark I just made, and then the 8 centimeters is here. So we've got to here for 5, and then we have here is 8. And I'm putting centimeters because I'm working in centimeters, but obviously this pattern will be a smaller version of the same pattern. So we can draw those 2 lines in, or rather 1 line, because it's 1 line that's divided in 2. So there, and we have the 5 centimeters and we have the 8 centimeters, or 5 inches, 8 inches. It says here 28 inches, so that's 28 centimeters. So I'm going to put the ruler on to there. So I can use my pen, my marker pen, and I can draw. Now we know from the end of the 8 inches here, they've put the edge of the skirt. The first thing I see is that the incline of this line is very different to what they have on their pattern here. I'm going to draw it in with a pencil first. There we go, and it's going down to there. Oops, right, that's kind of... So let's draw that in with the marker pen, because now we know that is a permanent line from the pattern. There we go. So already just looking at the pattern, that's a very different line to what's on the so-called pattern here. The next part is there's no indication of how long this line is meant to be. There's an indication of how wide the sleeve is meant to be, 7 inches, but there's no indication of how tall this bit is meant to be. So it's kind of a bit like guesswork, but we can use a little bit of math to figure it out. We have 4 and 3 inches on the neck here. So it says 4 across there and 3 down here, which when you look at it, this line is definitely longer than this line, and this line is meant to be 1 inch longer than that line, which also makes absolutely no sense. And then we have 11.5 inches plus 4 inches is 15.5 inches. So somehow this entire thing is meant to be 15.5 inches, which you can see on my ruler is the entire length of the ruler to there. So that doesn't seem too illogical for a shoulder from center front to end of sleeve. It's just we don't know where to put this on the drawing because we haven't got a measurement for this bit here. We only have a measurement for across here. So we're going to have to kind of make something up here, which is not ideal, but looking at the general body, the skirt, which is kind of here, hits not on the waist, but just below the waist on the hip. So we could assume that the height of this is 18 to 22 inches, maybe. I mean, if that's 7 inches, 7 goes kind of 3 times into the missing, or twice. So 1, 2, 3 into the missing bit here, into the cutout here. So that's 21. So if we go with 22, it's guesswork because there's nothing there. So I'm going to say 22, and that brings me up to here. Now that's just outside of view of the camera, so I'm going to just turn it a little bit. So we don't know if this is accurate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dot this line in with my pen because we know it's going to be, this is a line, but we just don't know if this is the correct line. So it comes up to there. And we also know this, for some reason, the back of the neck here is completely straight, whereas in a sensible pattern, it would curve down. For some reason, it's completely straight across. So we're going to go with what we see, and it's 4 inches, which means we want 4 centimeters, and join that right in with a pen because that's what they're saying. Then we have an 11.5 inch from the neckline to the sleeve, but it's on a slight curve going down. And again, we have no indication of what curve this is. So I'm going to put 11. I'm just going to put my ruler on in a kind of a slant here and draw 11.5 centimeters at a slight slant. So that comes to there. Now we have 5 centimeters here, or 5 inches, but then in the middle of the bodice piece it says 10 inches, but it doesn't quite give you an indication of where on the bodice piece this is going into 10 inches. But I guess around here-ish there's a 10-inch mark, which is 10 centimeters. So we're gonna just put the ruler down on 10 centimeters randomly and just put a little pen or pencil mark there. So the curve has to go through that pencil mark and up. Now we know the sleeve is 7 inches and it's pretty darn straight down. So I'm gonna just put the line in and it goes to here. So now we know that from here to there, via the dot here, we have to put this curve in. And if you look at it, this is the dot. If I put a curve down to there, it continues out and it doesn't hit the mark there. In fact, let's just draw this in with our marker pen. There. And if I draw a curve from here to here, it doesn't even touch the mark at the 10-inch spot. So we have some information missing on how this is meant to work. So I'm going to draw the 2 options in with the marker pen. So we have a curve that goes like that, but we have a point here which is the 10-inch mark. I'm writing 10 centimeters because we're working in centimeters. So we've got a missing piece of information here. So this is 7 and this is 11.5. And this bit here is 4. And then of course we mustn't forget the neckline, and the neckline is 3 centimeters, which comes down to here. So putting in a curve. So just judging by the picture, that's a very different curve to what we have in the original. Whilst editing this video, I realised that obviously the issues that are happening to this curve could potentially be that we guessed this length to be 22 inches or 22 centimeters, which might not be correct. If it was shorter, then this curve might work out, but looking at it, it would have to be a lot shorter for that curve to go out and create the sleeve, making the bodice size and the skirt size even more disproportionate because the skirt is already huge. We also have a 5-inch here on the fold is 10 inches. If this is a pattern for the front and the back, that makes it a waist of 20 inches on a 7-foot tall person, which is just not possible. But we're going to continue as if this is possible. Let's pretend that that is how it is and it works and it's fine and it's dandy. This is the bit that, according to the pattern, of course, creates the gather here. there's a wobbly line from here to here, which indicates gathers. But it doesn't say anywhere on here. I think maybe you're supposed to guess that because the wobble starts here, you're supposed to gather it into there, because this line wants to meet this line when you put it together to make one side seam. And then this is where you'll have the gather, and then that becomes the skirt. But it doesn't say where to start the gather, and it doesn't say that it's missing a piece of information. It's time for a voiceover here because what I said in this part wasn't very clear and a little bit garbled. So there's a symbol of a pair of scissors here, meaning that you're supposed to cut the top and the bottom apart, like the bodice and the skirt are meant to be cut separately. I don't know why they didn't just draw two separate pieces, because it looks like it's meant to be one piece. That will help you when you're gathering and then sewing the bodice part to the skirt, but it still doesn't tell you where to start the gathers on the skirt, unless you just guess that you're meant to use the squiggle line as an indicator of where to start the gather. So this part is very unclear. There would also be a seam across the center of the dress where I'm drawing here. There isn't in the picture, so who knows what you're supposed to do there. Anyway. I mentioned already, the bodice seems tiny compared to the skirt because the bodice is 22 centimeters or 22 inches. That was guesswork. The skirt is, according to the pattern, 45 inches. 45 inches is 110 centimeters. And 110 centimeters from your hip to your mid-ankle means you have to be over 7 foot tall for that measurement to be accurate. 7 foot tall. This pattern is absolute AI garbage. Now, if you'd like to see me try and cut this out of fabric and make it, then let me know. Oh, by the way, there's no back. The pattern has no mention of a back. Maybe the back is identical. Who knows?